I'll be reading to you this morning from Judges chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made them for themselves the dens and caves and strongholds which are in the mountains. So it was, whenever Israel had sown, Midianites would come up, also Amalekites and the people of the east would come up against them. Then they would encamp against them and destroy the produce of the earth as far as Gaza, and leave no substance for Israel, nor sheep, nor ox, or donkey. For they would come up with their livestock and their tents, coming in as numerous as locusts. Both they and their camels were without number, and they would enter the land to destroy it. So Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord.
Good morning, church family. Good morning to all of our guests, our honored guests this morning. You're in for a treat. As announced a moment ago, our Bible class this morning was the beginning of a short course on the prophet Isaiah by Dr. Jordan Guy from Harding University. And after hearing that, some of you say, I want to be a part of that class. The next installment will be Wednesday night in our Wednesday night Bible class. Then on Thursday and Friday for 3 successive hours, from 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12 on Thursday, and on Friday. We're putting 8 classes together on this marvelous series of study. I also twisted his arm this morning and asked him to preach for us. If you didn't hear him in class, you're about to hear Dr. Jordan Guy.
Thanks, Dad. One of my favorite pastimes is watching the Biography channel. I don't know how many of you enjoy these types of shows, but I've always been amazed at how they can summarize a person's life in about 30 to 60 minutes. I've often wondered if they were to do a biography on me, what would they say? You know, what would they talk about? Would they talk about my family? Would they talk about my career? Would they talk about my good deeds? Would they include my not so good deeds? What would they consider to be my lasting legacy? About a year ago, one of the former presidents at Freed-Hardeman, E. Claude Gardner, passed away. And I had the privilege of going to his funeral. And there were so many people filled up the auditorium there at Freed-Hardeman, and person after person went up to the stage and shared stories of his life. It was about 3 hours in total, people just talking about the significance of this one man. And I think it was then that I began to think even more deeply about this subject, not only of my own mortality, but also the legacy that I am leaving behind. The Bible is basically a collection of biographies, many stories of individuals and what they did. Some stories are long and some are short. Some characters are good, some are evil. The one that I've chosen to talk about this morning, Gideon, is a little bit ambiguous. He has some good deeds and he has some not so good deeds. And I think that his story is one that we can really relate to. And so as we think about his story this morning, I want you to figure out, before we get to the end, what is his lasting legacy? We heard read for us a few moments ago the context for Judges chapters 6 through 8. It begins in a time when Israel was plagued by the Midianites. And God had warned Israel about this. He said, if you are faithful to me, I will bless you, but if you are faithless, I will send another nation against you until you turn back toward me. In the reading, you heard about how the Israelites were digging into caves and mountains just to hide from this countless multitude in order that they might eat just a simple meal for the day. And then God sends a prophet. Just a few moments ago in class, we were talking about the role of these prophets. This prophet comes on this occasion to tell the Israelites just why the Midianites have come. God delivered Israel from Egypt, and he gave them one instruction: do not worship other gods. But they did not listen to the Lord, and because they turned to these other gods, God sent the Midianites to judge them. One of the most important things you need to know about the book of Judges is that in the book of Judges, everybody sins. just like today. You can't help it. Everybody is going to sin. The worst thing in the book of Judges, then, is not sin, but it's rejecting the prophet. When the prophet comes and tells you that you've sinned and you persist in your ways. So let me say that again. The worst thing in the world is not sin. It's refusing to repent when you know that you're in sin. And so after Israel sinned and God sent the prophet to tell them they were in sin, we find out what they do about this. The next scene is of Gideon, a man that we meet for the first time. And he's in a wine press, and he's trying to sift wheat. That's a very strange place to try to sift wheat, because the process of sifting wheat requires you to throw the grain into the air and allow the wind to blow the chaff away. Well, a wine press is basically a hole in the ground. So why would you go into a hole in the ground to try to get access to the wind? This just shows how scared he was, and maybe even how foolish he was at times. But it's when he's in this hole, literally, when he's hit rock bottom, literally, that God comes to him. If you look carefully at the text, you'll see that from time to time, the presence of God is given different titles. At first, it's the angel of the Lord. Then it's the angel of God. And sometimes it's just God, or Yahweh, the personal name of God, which has led many scholars to try to debate this and figure out what's going on. Some have thought, well, maybe there's two different entities speaking to Gideon in the story. Maybe there's this angel on the ground who speaks to him sometimes, and maybe God speaks to him from heaven other times. But when you read the story, it doesn't look like he thinks he's talking to two different entities. In fact, he believes he's talking to one. So what I think may be going on here is that the narrator of this story is trying to tell it from Gideon's perspective. At the beginning, he thinks he's merely talking to a messenger from God. But by the end of the story, he realizes he's actually speaking to God himself. So as the story opens up, this angel of the Lord comes to him in the winepress and says, "God is with you, O mighty man of valor." Now, from everything we can tell about Gideon, he is anything but a mighty man of valor. Maybe, even though we're not told about this, maybe he was a mighty warrior already, and those who would hear the story about him would already know that. Or maybe God is looking into his future and seeing that he's going to be a mighty man of valor. Or maybe, and this is the option I like to think, maybe God sees him as he truly is, not based on his past deeds or based on his future deeds, but he is created by God, loved by God, a man of worth, a man of valor, a strong man. If there's nothing else you hear me say this morning, I want you to know that you are mighty people of valor. You are valuable to God, and it doesn't matter what you've done in the past, it doesn't matter what you will do in the future, God values you. And so God says, "Oh, mighty man of valor, God is with you." But just like today, he scoffs at both of those ideas, that he's a mighty person of strength and that God is with him. He says, if God is with us, then why have all these bad things happened to us? Where are the stories that our forefathers recounted saying, "Did not the Lord deliver us out of Egypt?" Where's my Exodus? Where's my burning bush? I want to see a miracle today. Now, when we read through the Bible, we think on every page there was a miracle and everyone experienced God's presence in that way. But you can see in this story it wasn't the case. Sometimes you have people in the Bible, just like today, who say, "I don't feel like God's around. I've heard all these stories about God in the Bible. My parents have told me all these stories about God's presence." But if God is really here today, where is the sign of his presence? Where's the evidence? Where's the proof that God is with us? That's something your best friend asked you yesterday. That's something you have asked yourself this morning. If God is with us, then why do I feel so bad? God is with us, then why is my bank account so low? God is with us, then why can I not be on good terms with anybody? Where is the sign of His presence? Now here's the ironic part of the story. God is standing right in front of him. When he's asking where God is right there. He couldn't be any closer to him. But he doesn't see him. He doesn't understand him because he hasn't felt the effects yet of God's presence. And you know, from God's perspective in this story, he has every right to just blast him right there. What are you saying? Challenging me? Challenging my presence? Haven't you seen all that I'm doing? Don't you know what the prophet said? It's your fault, not my fault. God could have said anything, and he would be in the right because he is God. But instead, God looks at Gideon and says, "Good. I like this. Go in this might of yours and deliver Israel. Have not I sent you?" Be careful about seeing all the problems in the world and telling God about it. He says, "That's why I brought you into the world, to solve all these problems." And Gideon says, "Oh no." He backs up, like at a board meeting when you recommend these suggestions. They say, "Okay, you're in charge now." He says, No, you've got the wrong guy. I'm the youngest in my family." I can relate. Any of y'all youngest kids in your families? Yeah? He says, "I am from a weak clan in a weak tribe." So he's from the tribe of Manasseh, which is there's two halves of that, so it's a half tribe, and he's of the weakest clan in that half tribe, and he's the youngest in his family. God, I think you were thinking about my older brothers. I think you were thinking of the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Benjamin. You've got the wrong guy. Choose someone else. Well, we've heard that complaint before. And maybe that's not too bad. It's the leader who always wants to be at the front, who always wants to do it, that you should watch out for. The humble ones seem to be the ones that God chooses. But he says, "I'm not so sure that I'm the right pick." And God says, "Oh, you're confused. I will be with you." The same exact words God speaks to Moses. The same exact words Jesus promises his fearful disciples before he ascends. "Lo, I will be with you always, even until the end of this age." You're confused. You thought I meant you were going to do it alone? No. I will be with you. And he says, "Well, I need a sign." And so he goes and prepares a meal and says, "Please wait." And it takes a while for him to prepare this meal. He has to get the animal dressed and cooked. He has to make bread. And he brings it out to who, at this point, he thinks is just a messenger from God. When he arrives with the cooked meal, the messenger says, "Put it on this stone." And when he does, the messenger takes his staff, touches the meal, and it becomes a whole burnt offering to the Lord. And then the messenger disappears, possibly in the flames. And it's at this point that Gideon realizes who he's been talking to the whole time. And he fears that he's about to die because he has seen God. I'm not sure exactly where Israel got this idea that being in the presence of God was a scary thing and something you should run away from or something that's going to lead to death. It seems like Moses and others realized that you could go right up into the very presence of God without fear. Maybe it's a mark about the person's character and nature. Or maybe it's just that some people understood God and some people just didn't get it. But Gideon was afraid that because he has seen God, he's going to die. And God says in so many words, my summary here, "If I had wanted to kill you, I would not have come. I have a mission for you. That's why I've come." In fact, I have 3 missions for you. First mission, I want you to tear down the altar to Baal that's set up at the house of Joash. I forgot to tell you that Joash is Gideon's father. So the cult to Baal in Israel, the thorn in their side, the reason why the Midianites were there is because of Gideon's dad. And if Gideon was still living at home, it's his own house. Maybe that sheds some more light on why God called Gideon. Maybe it's not because he was this mighty warrior someone who had already saved the day. Maybe it's because he was part of the problem. And there was no way that God was going to fix Israel until he fixed Gideon. There's no way that we can help the world until our house is in order. And so he's supposed to go to his father's house in the backyard and tear down the altar to Baal. And then in its place, he's supposed to set up an altar to Yahweh and begin offering a sacrifice to Yahweh God. Now, imagine if that happened today. You come to worship this morning expecting to worship in this building. But over the course of the evening, some people have come and torn down this building. And in its place, they have built up a temple to another god. Not only would you see that as an attack against the Christian God, but it would be a double strike against you because now they're worshiping their God in your place. And so he does this. Now he's terrified, so he takes 10 men with him and he does it by night. But he still accomplishes the task. In the morning, the town wakes up, they go to their altar expecting to worship Baal, but they see that their building's been torn down and its place is an altar to another god, and they are outraged. So they ask questions of all the townspeople to find out who is behind this, who has done this, so they might be held accountable. They find out it's Gideon. So they knock on Joash's door and they say, "Bring out your son that he might answer for what he has done. We're going to kill him." Now, Joash obviously loves Baal. He's got an altar to Baal in his backyard. But he loves his son, Gideon, even more. So he comes up with this very interesting argument. He says, you know what? If Baal is a god, let him contend for himself. If anyone would fight Baal's battles, let him be put to death by morning. And the people listen to that reasoning and they agree. And so they renamed Gideon Jerubbaal. That is, let Baal contend for himself. It's kind of a curse, to watch him. If he just falls over dead one day, they'll say, Baal got his revenge. So from time to time in this story, he'll be called Gideon or Jerubbaal. What an interesting reasoning that they came up with. If he's a god, let him fight his own battles. I believe strongly in apologetics. Oftentimes at Harding, in my sophomore class, Old Testament survey, I'll talk about how we can trust the Bible, how we can know there is a God, how we know Jesus is the Son of God. In fact, that's the first week of every class I teach, no matter what it is. But there are times when we need to step back and let people experience God for themselves. Sometimes we can let God defend himself. And that is exactly what this argument convinced them of. And so in this first mission, Gideon got his house in order, he got his father in order, he got his community in order, and God says, now you're ready for step 2, driving out these Midianites. Now Gideon was able to get together an army of 32,000 troops, which sounds like a lot. But remember, they're up against the Midianites, who are described as too numerous to count. And so God comes to Gideon and says, there's a problem. And if I were Gideon, I'd be thinking, yeah, there's a problem. We have too few troops. But God says, no, you have too many troops for me to receive the credit. If you win with 32,000, they're going to think it's because of you. So ask anyone who's afraid to go home. So he does. 22,000 soldiers go home, leaving him with just 10,000 troops. God says there's a problem. Gideon's thinking, yeah, most of my army's gone. God says, no, you still have too many troops. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take them down to the water, and I want you to watch how they drink. Okay. And then I want you to separate them based on the way that they drink. So he did. He watched, and 9,700 of them drank like a soldier, on one knee, cupping the water, bringing it to their mouth, prepared in case any army came, they could rise up, draw their sword, and fight. While 300 of them were ill-prepared, they lay down on their stomachs and lapped up the water like a dog. Not only had they not fought before, they probably haven't drunk water before. I mean, this is a very strange kind of thing, and I'm not going to act that out for you, by the way. So imagine, lapping the water up. God says, I want you to let the 9,700 go home and take the 300 dog lickers with you. and they are going to win this battle for you. So the 300 of them and Gideon are going to the army. And again, I'm thinking Gideon's nervous at this point. God says, one more thing. I don't want you to take any weapons with you. You can have jars, you can have torches, and you can have trumpets. But no swords, no spears, no stones. And I want you to divide up into 3 different armies. And I want you to get in the mountains where they're in the valleys. And at nighttime, in those 3 groups of 100 each, I want you to break the jars, exposing the lit torches, blow the trumpets, and yell as you run down the mountains, for the Lord and for Gideon. And when they do this, the Midianites who are asleep wake up. They're thrown into a panic. They think the Israelites have called for reinforcements, and so they're outnumbered. They begin swinging their swords, killing each other, and those they don't die run away, never to harm Israel again. And so the Lord delivers Israel without them having to fight at all. And clearly, Yahweh gets the credit for this, because there were 300 ill-prepared men who only had torches and jars and trumpets. I wonder if there's something in your life that is keeping God from getting all the credit. I wonder if the bank account's a little bit too big, if the resume is a little bit too long, if maybe all of your accolades and your strategy have made you believe what I tend to believe sometimes, and Gideon tends to believe sometimes, that is, we're able to do things in our own strength. What we need to reduce, what we need to take away, what we need to throw away in order for God to give the full credit for the accomplishments through us. Well, after Gideon had done this, everyone wanted to make him a king. They only had judges, but they thought this would be their chance to have a dynasty. And so they said, you will be our first king, and then your son will rule after you, and then your grandson after him. We'll start this kingdom right now. What would you do if you were posed with this question or this proposition? What if today someone said, you could be in charge of this country, or you could be in charge of even just this state? You could probably rationalize some reasons why you could do a better job than this guy or that girl. I could be in charge. I could do a better job. Jesus was posed with this same proposition. They wanted to take him by force and make him their king. Do you remember what he did? He eluded them. He disappeared. And instead he went to a cross. Because he knew the way to advance God's mission was not through some human kingdom of his own device, but rather to sacrifice oneself for the sake of the world. I don't know if I would do that. Gideon, to his credit, did that. He said, I will not be your king. My son will not be your king. My grandsons will not be your king. Yahweh will be your king. I so wish the story ended there. If the story ended there, the lesson would be simple. Be like Gideon. But immediately after that, for some strange unknown reason, and we're not told why, there's no footnotes, no secret message behind the text in Hebrew. The very next verse he says, but I will take your gold. And he takes their gold and he melts it down and he constructs an ephod, which is normally a garment, but here it seems to refer to an idol. And it says it became a snare to all Israel that worshipped it, and to Gideon and his own family, undoing the first mission that he went out to accomplish, tearing down the altar of Baal in his own father's backyard. He puts an idol back in front of Israel. Then, because he was so successful, he marries all of these women and has 70 children by them. One of those children becomes the next judge of Israel. His name is Abimelech. You know what his name means? My father is king. Gideon named his son, my father is king, when he told Israel, I will not be your king, and my son will not be your king. I guess that wore off, and later he decided he did want to be a king, or at least he wanted his son to be a king. And Abimelech is the worst judge of all, because he tries to be king, killing his other brothers. and then tormenting the towns of Israel. And then when Gideon dies, it says that everybody forgot about all the missions that he accomplished, especially the one against the Midianites. So by the end of his life, he had undone all three of his missions. So what is Gideon's lasting legacy? You know, we look at Gideon and we say, shame, shame, shame. Yet how many of our stories are so similar? How many people do you know that are just like Gideon? How many families begin with God at the center, but now they don't pray together? How many kids say, I'm going to honor my parents, but now they can't even look at themselves in the mirror because of what they've done? How many of us come out of the waters saying, I'm on fire for Jesus, I'm going to tell the whole world about Jesus? And now those people don't even go to church. I've come to realize that a legacy is not an amount of money that you leave behind for your kids and your grandkids. It's not about one big deed or one really good thing that you do that people remember you for. It's simply starting and finishing. When my grandmothers married, and you can ask them this to this day, they married unbelievers, and they said it was very challenging on them. They don't recommend it. They said it was particularly challenging once they had kids, because not only were they having to get dressed and get ready, get their kids, get themselves to church, but then they also had to get their kids ready and go to church. That's extra hard when you have someone who's not going, who can often be discouraging at times too. And I said, how did you do it? And they said, because anything worth starting is worth finishing. They said, we knew we wanted to be in heaven, and we knew that we wanted our kids to be in heaven, and we knew that we wanted our husbands to be in heaven, so we just kept fighting. I asked a couple who'd been married for 50 years how they stayed married for so long. They said they never got divorced. Pretty good answer. What is a legacy? I want you to imagine right now that everything you've ever wanted comes to pass. I want you to imagine that everybody you want in heaven responded today. I want you to imagine that everything you've started in this life is finished. And I want you to go in this might of yours and of the Lord's might and deliver your Israel. This morning, if we can assist you in any way, won't you come as together we stand and sing?